Howdy, ladies and gentlemen, it's PM Turner, bringing you episode 9 of Teen Talk on Classic Criterion. Today, a very special friend of mine and I will be discussing The Furies, a 1950 Western directed by Anthony Mann and starring Barbara Stanwyck, Walter Huston, and Wendell Corey. Criterion spine number 435. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to episode 9 of Teen Talk on Classic Criterion, and today's guest is River, who is also the creator of that brilliant Old Hat Cinema intro. And you know why he's on Teen Talk today? It's because I haven't been paying him royalties for that, so he dropped in just kind of looking for, yeah, he's looking for his money. And I told him, you know what, let's just sit down and film a video instead. So I'm hoping by the end of the shoot he might forget all about that. So, yeah. that said, today we are going to be discussing the intense psychological Western, The Furies.
Did you say Western?
I did.
Give me 1 second. I'm ready.
Brilliant.
Okay.
We are ready. So to begin with, would you like to give us a brief summary of the film, River?
Basically what happens is the family is mourning the loss of the mother. And the daughter Vance is a scene, and she's talking to who I believe is her brother. And her father is the owner of the ranch that they all live at, and he is supposed to be a very rich man, but he loans out a lot of money to different people. So while they're also trying to mourn the loss of their mother in crippling debt, they just don't know it because their father is lying to himself and to everybody else. And then they're also dealing with squatters on the property, and one of them, Juan Herrera, is the main protagonist's love interest, I would say. So she has to grapple with the conflict of getting him and his family off the property or standing with them while also trying to maintain the Furies as sort of her heritage.
Yeah, and that's a pretty in-depth summary right there. And The Furies also stars Barbara Stanwyck as the main protagonist, and Walter Huston as her father, and co-stars Wendell Corey, who can be a decent actor given a decent script. So, River, what is your prior experience with the Western genre? Because The Furies is so set apart from your average Western.
I've seen a lot of older Westerns from the early 1900s because I feel like other than things like Cowboys versus Aliens, they don't really have Westerns nowadays. But I feel that the genre itself, even though it is sort of older, it could be utilized a lot better than they use it nowadays. Because nowadays when they use it, it's more of a satire.
Good point.
But I would love to see something that honors more of the classic Westerns. Like this movie, it hit a lot of good points that I feel like they could definitely use for the future as reference.
Right, and so that said, based on your prior experience with the Western genre, how would you say The Furies differs from that? In what way or in what aspects?
I'd say there are many Westerns out there that focus on subplots and like the romantic love interest sort of aspect. This movie has a lot of different branching aspects. Like there is a gambler named Rip that she likes, and then there's Juan Herrera that she likes, and her father's relationship's a little bit testy. Don't really know much about that. It's a little bit all over the place, so it takes a good like sit down, pay attention, watch it, but it definitely holds up, I'd say.
Good points, all of them. And I might add to your comment about her rather odd relationship with her father, that throughout the film, what most stood out to me is that she appears to have a father attachment while also hating her father.
Yeah, it's quite weird. It's definitely not a healthy relationship.
No. So with all these different aspects and subplots of the film, does The Furies feel like it holds up today for viewing, or does it feel strange and outdated or even insignificant?
I'd say because there isn't much to compare it to in the modern genre of Western, it's definitely not insignificant, and it doesn't really get lost in the theme that it's trying to uphold. I feel like a lot of people nowadays with movies, modern movies like Marvel or Star Wars and all that, people might get a little bit bored if they don't sit down and actually pay attention to it, because instead of being like all up in your face trying to hold your attention the whole time, it's more of a slow, okay, piece by piece, you gotta put it together. So I'd say unless you have the time to sit down and actually appreciate the movie, then there are a lot of people who I'd say would enjoy it if they did take the time.
Right, and the movie does certainly go at its own pace. It kind of has a very slow burn up to a very intense climax, actions that the characters find themselves in toward the end. So, the psychological aspect, to me, is the main thing that sets the Furies apart. So the psychological aspect being her relationship with her father, her relationship with these two very different men in her life. Is this psychological aspect a positive one, or does it detract in any way from the film?
I don't think it detracts as much as it is dragged out in sort of a slow way. Like, there are certain things that happen, like, I believe she would have stood with her friend Juan if she saw him as more of a love interest, and she shouldn't have kept going back to Rip, who would deceive her and betray her for his own benefit. And while all of it had many redeeming points throughout the movie, would try to get back at her father, or she would try to get back at Rip, and sometimes it would backfire on her. It's not, her attitude doesn't progress in the way that I think it would for most people if they were in that situation. So I'd say it's a little bit slower in that aspect than it should be, but the character development and the psychological aspect definitely, it's very good towards the end, and coming to the climax of the movie, it's definitely sort of a tension relief.
Very well said, River. And I think what we have to thank for a lot of these more intelligent, interesting parts of the film, the movie was from a novel by a writer by the name of Niven Bush. And I actually have not read the novel yet, but because of all these interesting characters and subplots and just layers of psychological insight, I would be very interested in reading the novel at some point in the near future.
I would too. It definitely seems like it'd be a pretty neat read, especially if you've seen the movie too. It'd be nice to compare them.
Right, right. See how closely the screenplay follows the original novel.
Alongside the pacing.
Right, right. And so I think that pretty much covers it. That was really good. That was very in-depth. But before we end, I can't let us leave without hearing your thoughts on Walter Huston's performance as T.C. Jeffords.
He did a very good job. He definitely, there were a lot of points where I wanted to punch him, which I feel like if that was the sort of way he was trying to go with the character, he did a peak performance, and it was the last performance he ever did.
It was. He died shortly after filming was completed, but you would never know it from seeing all his energy and vitality in the film.
No, and I'd say if he had known that he would die soon after, and he knew that was his last performance, I'd say he definitely did a great job for his last performance, because it definitely seemed like he gave it all he had.
Absolutely. And Walter Huston was one of the most talented, versatile actors of classic-era Hollywood, and I think that The Furies was an extremely worthy fade-out to a great career.
Yeah, for sure.
So, alright, thank you, River, for being a participant on Teen Talk for Classic Criterion. This was great, and really enjoyed having you.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Hey everyone, look! It worked! River forgot all about his royalties by the end of the shoot. Very smooth, highly intelligent, and immensely enjoyable. In fact, that description applies to all three things in this context. The movie itself, the YouTube shoot we just did, and my participant. Like River said, this movie definitely takes its time and goes at its own pace, but for the viewer who is willing to sit down and invest the time needed to really get into this brilliant piece of filmmaking, it is most definitely a worthwhile watch. Thanks to River for doing this video with me. We've been wanting to do one together for a long time. I loved having him, and it was an absolute blast. I would like to be candid for a moment and acknowledge River for being Not the only, but one of the few people to appear on TTCC who truly gets me and my quirky obsession with classic cinema, and for that, I sincerely thank him. So River, I know you'll be watching this, so I just wanted to say stick around, because there's so much more classic cinema I want to introduce you to. As always, I'm your host, PM Turner, and take my word for it, go watch the Furies. But before you do, why don't you ride out to the range with your trusty rope and lasso that like button for me and subscribe to Old Hat Cinema. Yeehaw!